is whenever I go into a watch store, a salesman's always trying to sell me. And I always tell them, nope, if I see a watch, I like it. If I find myself thinking about the watch a few weeks from now or a month from now or 2 months from now, I'll reassess it and I'll still look.
That's the pause period. Yeah.
Yes. And it's funny, several years ago, probably 15, 16 years ago, I met somebody at a wedding and they were like, hey, Paul, I'm majorly in debt. What do you recommend? And I said to them, what's your biggest problem? Like, I just buy it spontaneously. I'm like, okay, just wait 48 hours. If you still want it, buy it. And that was
you say that? That's good.
Yes. I said, wait 48 hours. And I swear to you, I saw them at a wedding 2 or 3 years later, all debt gone. They had 25 grand in cash in their bank account just from doing that. I was floored.
Now, if I said that to someone in person, I would fail to get the message across. There's something about the way I can address groups well. I can address groups in books well. But when I do a one-on-one of the sort you just described, for some reason, I evoke this sort of fight response that causes people to double down on the wrong action. And I don't know what this is, but I mean...
Well, don't give me too much credit. Don't give me too much credit. That was the first one. And just like the first time I ever called a random apartment building I saw on the street and said, I want to buy you, and they sold to me, which was absolutely the dumbest thing, most profound thing ever. And then since then, I probably called 100 and nobody's even sent me financial. So it was just dumb luck. But I remember that sticking with me as this person. I said it very, it wasn't even like a thorough conversation. It was literally like, okay, what's your biggest problem? Well, I spend very quickly. I want something, I impulsively buy it. I'm like, well, then just wait 48 hours. If you still want it, go buy it. It was literally said like that. And all of a sudden, 2 years later, like, Paul, I'm out of debt and I have 25 grand in cash. I was like, holy cow, how did that happen? I mean, I wasn't.
So Seth, are you picking up on this? Yet again, you have two value investors now on an adjacent topic of personal finance saying the same thing. This sort of wait period.
Yeah, I mean, I find I come from a spending family, and I find myself sort of addicted to the process of spending money. I've been lucky enough to be.
That's a difficult thing to break out of.
Yes.
Yeah, but again, it's funny. I might have been. I worked for a company, Kenneth, that really talked about how embracing really bad things in your life truly as gifts. And Paul's really great about this. Paul and Mo are really great about this. Tim as well, our producer, about like anything something bad happens. Like, well, the good news is, and so I guess the good news of me growing up, just seeing my parents just like spend money, go in debt, is now I can teach my kids how not to do that. Yeah. But it starts with a plan. We teach a plan and a process on this show. And so I'm dying to ask, like, what are you seeing? I guess I keep considering these students at Stanford, but you're saying it's a whole range. Like, how many people have no financial plan? Because I certainly did until I met Paul. Like, what are you seeing out there, and how is it improving?
Like, no financial background?
No. I'm talking about, like, my financial plan in life was that the money comes in, I just spend and hope, and just kind of hope. I mean, forget a budget, a balance, a monthly in and out. It was just like, well, I hope if I go into credit card debt, I got to pull it back. Like, I had no plan whatsoever.
And I think also for Seth, it was also put money in your 401k, but don't figure out how much money you need to retire with, how much money you will have in retirement. I mean, Seth just was told at his company, buy companies you like, and the rest will take care of itself. And I don't think Seth ever sat down and said, what do I need at 65 in order for me to be able to live the next 30 years of retirement?
Okay. All right. So we get a couple strands going here. I want to go back to something Seth said at first, which is really valuable to key on, which is some things he saw in his early family life that he didn't think set a really good example.
Yeah, for sure.
For how he should conduct himself financially. Look, you can take as an example bad conduct, and if you properly position it in your mind as a contra example, you can totally make hay out of that. And the best example I can give is my father, who passed about 5 years ago. He was a wonderful guy. He was a brilliant entrepreneur. Started a wonderful company with my mom and sold it in 1990 and around that time. And when he came into some cash, tried to invest well, and it could have gone much better. He basically attempted to become the venture capitalist of the sort that had backed his business. But that's private company investing, really angel investing, which is a tough row to hoe under almost all circumstances. The returns from listed equity investing, even just in index funds, works much better. And that was very powerful for me. It didn't take away, any of my love for this guy at all, because he did so much brilliant in life. But in this one space of allocating capital, it was a contra example. And I took it as such. And so, Seth, I mean, that's what you do. You look at something and it's tough because it's your dad, right? Or it's your mom, or it's your siblings, or something like this. But you can ring fence a particular area of their conduct and say, I get it. I know what that is. That's something I'm not going to do. That's just as powerful as seeing someone do something very right in their finances and modeling your behavior on that. That's the first thing I want to say, because that's the way that you can turn around a background that's maybe not the most conducive to good financial behavior going forward.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, so it's my parents are both doctors, and so I was born in the Middle East, and we came here when I was really, really young.
Right.
But I always joke with people, and I'm opening a lot up here, and maybe I shouldn't, I don't know. My parents are both very successful financially doctors. My parents both still are. They still work, but the great news is they work because they love working. So that's the one thing I got from them.
That's the best.
And I tell people, I love when people say to me like, "Oh, when are you going to retire?" And I very cocky, I respond, if I wanted to retire, I would have retired by now. And we joke about my semi-retirement. Yeah, you laugh but it's almost like my way of saying, I actually tell people, I feel bad if you look forward to retirement, because to me,
I understand. No, you're right.
Yeah, and I look at it saying, I joke and say, I want to die at my desk. Now, I consider myself semi-retired now. I always joke to people and say I'm retired because I do exactly what I want when I want to in the fashion of which I want to do it. Even this show, Kenneth, Seth and I have had arguments before where he says, Paul, we've got to do it this way. And I say, well, then I'm just not going to do it. And that's the power of money and wealth that's so beneficial, is I can just sit there and say, well, then I'm not going to do it that way. Well, why? Because I don't want to. I wouldn't enjoy it then. And if people choose not to watch the channel, they choose not to watch the channel, whatever. But the thing I got from my parents was really enjoying what you do. They love medicine. They're both 68, 70, and they both still work. And my dad, it's funny, my dad always says, hey, I had a doctor friend of mine who was 93 when he finally died, and he was still practicing every single day until the day he died. That's one of the benefits. One of the negatives is I felt that my parents were very cheap about money and very cheap about things. And that's one thing. I talk about the watches. To me, my dad looks at my mom's this week. By the way, keep in mind, Kenneth, I save over 80% of my income. And my mom this weekend said I'm an unwise spender of money. And I just sat there and said, oh my God, here we go with and I save over 80% of my income. And I'm like, Mom, really? And I jokingly said, Mom, you don't even know what I make. And she's like, oh yeah, you're right. But that's the one area where my mom sees me spend a lot of money in XY, like on my house. I just bought a new house, but it was old, 100 years old. It needed renovation. She's like, how much money did you put into it? And I stupidly told her. And she goes, well, you're an unwise spender of money. And I'm like, you know what? I can afford to put money into a house where I don't care if I don't get the money out of it in 10 years. Now, granted, I think I will, but if I don't, I enjoy the house. And my way of looking at money is, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think your parents have a very wise approach to work.
Of course, 100%.
Yeah, that's very important, and it's one of the things that Small Steps to Rich focuses on is work. That's also, as I see it, one of the 6 main spheres of personal finance. You want to become the kind of person you like. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to do work that you enjoy.
That's a great statement.
To do work you don't identify as something that provides sustenance merely, right? Something that's remunerative, hopefully, or at least fairly compensating. But something that you really like. You want to work around people you admire. You want to work in an environment that's conducive to your better angels. And it sounds like your parents figured that out. And that's a really good example.
Kenneth, what about I think there's a lot of folks in this world that don't have the freedom to enjoy the job they have.
Why not?
Paul.
Well, Paul's on to something. Why not, Seth? What are you talking about?
The more successful I get in life, Paul.
Successful in what sense?
Yeah, financially or what?
Financially, my businesses are growing. I don't always think making more money is more successful.
Of course not.
No,
but
I'm in a nice zone where my businesses are like your businesses. They're running. The effort level is slowing. However, the money's getting better. I'm happy, which is all tying in. It's a great. And a lot of this is with your guidance, But the better I get in life, when I see others in this world that doesn't seem like they're having the greatest day or they have the greatest job, I feel bad. And I think when they watch this show, Paul, I think they might feel bad about someone talking about a multi-million-dollar mansion and many shops and saying how happy you are, when in reality, I might be a truck driver, like a certain guy we know we just met yesterday, a truck driver, a construction worker who's having a hard time finding a job I love and let alone saving anything. And so, I guess I kind of bring their thoughts about how do we, Kenneth, what are your thoughts about changing
where
that environment?
Yeah, if someone is in a job they don't particularly care for, but that is providing near-term income, and they're in debt, so they have a big nut they have to pay every month just in interest, I will admit that's a tricky situation to get out of. But it is relatively easy these days to get recruited out of a position. Actually, particularly in truck driving and construction, as a matter of fact, because there's heavy demand for those jobs now, and there's not as many folks. It depends on what part of the country we're talking about, but companies are trying to fill slots there. So, if you're in a job you don't like, find 3 alternatives. One of the easiest ways to do that is if you have a professional profile on LinkedIn or some other professional social network, open yourself up to being contacted by recruiters. That way, your current employer doesn't have to know that you're looking. But you may find opportunities coming your way. But I would say make it your business to find 3 alternatives. If you find one, find another one, 2 more. If you just have 2, find a third. Because if you have options, that's when you can make an intelligent choice. This is a point made in Small Steps to Rich. Find alternatives. But we spend our most alert hours working. It's when we're at our human best. So you don't want to mess that up. You don't want to have perennial job dissatisfaction, because that leads to all kinds of problems, not the least of which is that you're not enjoying yourself. So, Seth, I'm not saying it's easy to switch professions, particularly under some circumstances, but these days there's no excuse for not looking. It's easier than it's ever been.
Just hearing it from you already fires me up. I'm not even trying to change, but I mean, I guess sometimes it does take someone as eloquent a speaker as yourself or Paul in my life to have the courage to try something. I love having William Green on and you. I love when value investors who also write books, they just put things so much better in print than I ever could. But yeah, sometimes it just takes a good kick in the butt to say, you know what, go on LinkedIn and do something. And so yeah, that does get me fired up. And
but what Kenneth is saying, that's also, Kenneth, yes, the market right now is very good for finding a job. So when I teach at my high school, my old high school, I went to a private prep high school.
Kids, you guys all teach at high schools?
Yeah, remember I emailed you, and I was actually still working on getting.
That was at Case Western, I thought.
Yes, that is. But I also did my high school for a long time. We did 8 years in a row, but because of COVID, it kind of shut things down. I really enjoyed doing it, and the big reason is they had the same mentality I had in high school. Money equals happiness. And so I remember I always ask the kids every year, okay, guys, what does happiness mean to you? And invariably, every single time, it leads to income. So I sit there and say, okay, so what happens if you're miserable? Because I always tell people the worst thing in the world is being miserable at a job that pays you a lot of money. And the reason being is,
yes, good one.
You are trapped.
You won't leave.
You're trapped.
Dude, I went to business school. I went to business school with a lot of people that you just described.
Of course.
Highly paid, perennially miserable professionals that are respected greatly.
And how do you leave that? How do you leave? And the kids always say, well, yeah, but then I can take vacations and buy the stuff that makes me happy. I'm like, so now you're getting yourself deeper.
That's not how it goes. You don't suffer misery for the occasional happy. That's not what it's about.
That is how it's portrayed, though.
I'm sorry, Mo?
That's how the world portrays it, though. That's the unfortunate part. That's why when we ask the questions to these 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they say that.
But yeah, popularity is no proxy for correctness.
Of course. By the way, what is that? That's value investing. That's value. What you just said there.
Totally.
Is 100% literally all stocks are a voting machine in the short run and a weighing machine in the long run. You're 100% right, but the reality is anyways, keep going, Kenneth.
Well, I don't think that we want to manufacture that as the reality. People can decide,
of course, they can
make a morose existence their reality, and they can justify it by saying that, well, this is what everybody does. But that does not evidence critical thinking. That does not evidence intelligent navigation of one's life. I mean, some creativity in your approach to your situation is useful. When I was in business school, I do not have perfect conduct all the time, but I mean, when I was in business school, I remember during my second year, everybody interviewing with the consultancies that came on campus to interview, everybody interviewing with the investment banks that came on campus to interview. And I could never bring myself to do it because the work just sounded horrible. it's long hours working on stuff that I didn't particularly find interesting, if I understood them correctly, and I think I did. So that was innately popular, those things, but they didn't float my boat. And I don't think that people should be fooled. Once they hit a certain age of maturity, and I don't know if it's 18 or 25 or 30 or something like that, but I mean, at some point they are able to make a decision for themselves about what works for them. And as long as those are basically healthy and don't hurt other people, I think that those should be pursued. You know, I think this way about my own kids who are young now. But I mean, if they choose professions that don't hurt other people and are basically constructive for them and is what they sincerely want to do, that's pretty much the most you can hope for a child.
Absolutely.